Good morning, and welcome to this edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Burns, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Library Commission's weekly online event where we cover anything that may be of interest to librarians. We have commission staff that do presentations. We have guest speakers, as we have this morning. I'll get to that in just a second. We do these sessions live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. So you can join us here on Wednesdays, or if you're unable to join us, that's no problem. We also do record everything, so all of our recordings of all of our sessions are available on our website as well. So you can go back there and listen to any of our recordings, find the PowerPoint presentations, websites people have mentioned, whatever. We try and link all of that there as well. This morning, as you can see from the slide that you're viewing, we have Blake Carver, who is from LIS Hosts, the best hosting company there is for libraries, I would say.
It's my website.
And he's going to talk to us about IT security for your library. And actually, I should say, since you may have just heard, I do have here in the room with me Michael Sowers, who's our technology innovation librarian here at the Nebraska Library Commission, just to help with any technical questions or anything. I am not as knowledgeable about this kind of thing as you and Blake might be, so I thought it might help me to know what's going on if I had both Michael here in the room with me as well. So he's here just in case.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, Blake, I will turn it over to you now. You can go ahead, introduce yourself more if you want to, whatever, and take it away.
Thanks, Krista. So I've given several different versions of this talk over the past year or so. They range from about 4 hours to about 15 minutes, so I should end up talking about an hour or so today, hopefully a little bit less. So like Krista said, I run LAS Host, but I'm also a librarian, and I've worked at Bryant and Stratton College as an academic librarian. That was my first job out of library school, and I worked as a programmer at a .com startup for a few years here in Buffalo, and I worked at Ohio State as the web librarian there for a couple of years, and that's where I started LAS Host, and that's where my interest in security comes from, where we have I think 6 servers now, and we're under attack all the time. I see all sorts of different people coming after the servers for different reasons. And by day, I'm actually a librarian, more of a records manager at the power plant up in Niagara Falls, New York. So Bruce Schneier is one of the big guys in the security industry. He's kind of like the Michael Stevens of the security industry, but most of his hair is falling out, and he just has kind of a tiny little ponytail left. He gave a great talk at TEDx PSU a couple years ago, and he said security is 2 different things. It's a feeling and it's a reality. And he says that you can feel secure even though you're not, and you can be secure even though you don't feel like you're secure. And I think that's a great way to sort of start off and frame this entire thing today. And a lot of what I talk about is kind of scary. And when I gave this talk at Computers and Libraries, I was sitting around the bar with, I think Krista and Michael might have been there, and I said, okay, I'm going to go give my security talk now. Who's coming? And most of the people said that sitting there said, no, I'm not going. That's too scary. You're just going to yell at me about all my bad passwords for an hour. So there is, you know, this is stuff that should worry us a little, but it shouldn't keep us up at night for the most part. Basically, there's 3 types of bad guys out there, and you can break them down into 3 different groups. There's criminals. They're trying to steal your bank accounts and your passwords and whatever else. There's activists like the infamous anonymous group, where they're just trying to prove a point or just be annoying. And then there's government agents. They do things like Stuxnet and Flame. They work for, you know, the United States government, China, Russia, wherever, and they're out there. This is their job, to break into websites and do things. And they're basically everywhere we are. They're on social networks, they're on websites, they're trying to get into servers, they're putting stuff in ads that run on everywhere and anywhere, they're sending out spam with malicious attachments, they're trying to get into your cell phones and your home computers to get you on a botnet. They're, you know, anything that's plugged into the internet is game now. And we've all heard of stuff like, Trojans and worms and viruses, but there's all sorts of different ways for them to get into just about any computer that they want. So many, it's very easy if you're a programmer to leave something unchecked or make a small mistake and you leave a hole open for them to find a way to inject some malicious code into something that should otherwise not be malicious. And there's just a million ways you can make a little mistake to open something. And there's backdoors and there's scareware and there's keyloggers and spyware. There's an endless number of different things, different sort of generic terms for all these different ways they can find their way in. And they have all sorts of different tools that they can use, all sorts of different programs. We probably work with Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word and maybe SSH or something every day. And there's a whole industry of bad guys out there, and they are writing programs just like Microsoft Excel or Access, except for they're not crunching numbers. They're trying to break into computers. They're trying to break into web servers. And these things are really, really powerful, and they make it really, really easy to be a bad guy now. These things, you set them off, and they just go searching the web. They either go through random IP addresses or they search Google, and they find their way in, and they make it very, very easy. It's automatic, and there's almost no effort involved. So there's this huge industry out there now, somebody dubbed Malware Incorporated, and they work in places that they're hard to get to, like Russia, and they have teams of people that focus on finding old vulnerabilities that are easy to exploit. They're very anonymous. They hide behind things like the Tor network, and they find ways to launder money, and they find ways to stay hidden, or they pay off local people to keep them away. And all these things are all these tools that they write are very, very easy to use. For example, I found a whole bunch of different screenshots. I don't actually run any of these things, but there's sites that have just screenshots of the programs out there. This one's my favorite because it has Google Ads added in it. So whoever wrote this sells it and then sells ads within the program to make a few extra bucks. And they look like pretty much any other program. There's not a lot to them. SpyEye is one of the biggest ones out there. There's Zeus and SpyEye, and they do all sorts of different things. They can steal credit cards and break into web servers, and you can see there's a Bank of America grabber in there, all sorts of different things. They can take screenshots from your computer, and there's a manual for it, and they do everything they can to make it easy to use, and they want to steal just about anything they can get their hands on. And the last one here is a little spammer that sets up a botnet and send out spam to do whatever they want. So they're after all sorts of things. They're after usernames and contact lists. As you can imagine, they want to get in your bank account. They want to set you up, install something on your computer, make it part of a botnet. Maybe your phone numbers, your pins to things. And they're also after your social networking sites, because that's the newest, latest, greatest place to start to spread malware on Twitter or Facebook. Maybe you've seen one of your friends posted something that didn't look quite right, and you clicked on it and it didn't lead anywhere, or it installed, worse yet, it installed something on your computer and you didn't notice. All this stuff that they can get, all this personal information, it's really the currency of the underground economy. This is, each and everything that they can get is worth something to someone. So if they can get, say, 1,000 Facebook logins or 10,000 email addresses, just your email address probably isn't worth all that much, but if it's part of, say, 1 million email addresses, they could sell that for something out there because somebody else wants to do something with it. We're now in the era of steal everything. Was one of the articles that I read at some point when I was putting this together, and that was one of the quotes that really stuck with me, that anything on your computer is probably going to be worth something to someone out there. And there really is no such thing as a secure computer, pretty much anything, if someone is really determined, can be broken into. But as we'll talk about, there's a lot of things you can do to make yourself much, much safer and make yourself much less of a target. So here's a quick outline. That was my scary introduction. A quick outline of what we'll be talking about. I want to start with passwords because well, we all have passwords and passwords drive us crazy. General safety tips, desktop and laptops, email, web browsers, Wi-Fi, social media, mobile devices, and then talk about security in libraries, some of the biggest mistakes we can make, some practical policies, and then a little bit on server-side security, show you how a few things work on servers and what you can do to keep safe there. So, passwords. We all have passwords. We all have 50, 100, 200 passwords, and they're drive us all crazy. So the two worst things you can do is reuse your passwords or use a weak password. And I'll explain exactly why that is. Here's a great thing I found at nativeintelligence.com. Passwords are like bubblegum. Best when used fresh, should be only used once, should not be shared. They make a mess when they're lying around, and they're easy to steal. So I don't know how many people saw it either last night or this morning. LinkedIn, the professional social networking site, was hacked, and the bad guys just took 6 or 8 million of the usernames and passwords and dumped them to a website. So if you have an account on LinkedIn, you should go there and change your password now.
I went and did mine this morning.
And if that password, very good. If you're using that password everywhere else with that same email address, you should also change that password on all the other sites, because it's very, very easy for the bad guys to take that username or that email address and that password and just start plugging it into Facebook, Twitter, I don't know, wherever else you might have reused it. So this is the perfect example of why you don't want to reuse your passwords. Another good example is if you used a weak password, it's going to be cracked much, much faster. So the LinkedIn dump last night was the passwords were hashed, but they used a common algorithm, so they will be broken, especially any of the weak ones, any of the really short ones. Those will be the first ones to go. And if you used a super long, complex password, they might not even bother. Nobody will ever they'll give up after they've cracked 5 million of these things. So don't reuse your passwords across multiple sites, and use good, strong passwords. So what do I mean? Well, it's unique. That is, it's not the name of a professional sports team or the town you grew up in or something out of the Bible. It's complex. That is, it uses uppercase, lowercase numbers, special characters, maybe spaces if they allow it. It's long. The most common recommendation there is 8 characters, which is pretty good, but you should definitely make it longer than that if you can. I mean, some sites will limit your passwords to a certain length, but get in the habit of making them as long as possible. That's really what makes them harder to crack. Make them strong. That is all these other things combined. And maybe most importantly, make them easy to remember, because if you have this huge, long, complex password, you're not going to remember it. It doesn't do any good for anybody. So this is my ridiculous world's best password policy. It's actually based on the federal recommendation for passwords. So, world's best password policy. 32 characters in length, contain all the following character types, uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers, not to be similar to or contain any portion of a user login name, not to contain English words that are longer 4 letters, not to begin and end with a number, not to be the same as any of the previous 78 passwords in the password history, must be changed every 12 days, not use a sequence of keys, not use information about yourself, not use words associated with your occupation or hobbies, not to use words associated with popular culture, and not to be reused for multiple accounts. So that's great. You end up with a password like this that you can barely type, let alone remember. So this is a great theory, but it doesn't really work. It's really simple things that make a good, strong password. Use some letters, upper and lowercase if you can, maybe some numbers, maybe something else thrown in there like a @ sign or a %sign, but do make it as long as you can, and do not reuse it on multiple sites. So right now there's a whole bunch of people working through the LinkedIn passwords, and the way it works is they have these little programs, well, these big programs, I guess, that will guess what the hash is. All these were encrypted, and they have to guess each and every one of them. And if it's a short password, it gets guessed very, very quickly. If it's a long password, it takes much, much longer. For every character you add, you're talking it adds days, maybe weeks in to the amount of time that it takes to get guessed. So make it long and don't reuse it.
Blake?
Really, the best thing you can do, yes?
Michael has a question.
Yeah.
Yes, Michael.
I'll just ask your opinion of this, so we don't get into a big giant discussion if we disagree. But what is your opinion on regularly changing your passwords?
Oh, that's a great question, and it's coming up in 2 or 3 slides.
Oh, okay, great. Then I'll wait.
Okay. So the best thing you can do with your password is assume it will be stolen. Now, this makes it difficult because you're going to start using really good passwords and you're going to start using different ones on every site. I think we all get into the lazy habit of using the same password everywhere, but if you think about your passwords as something that will be stolen, you'll start thinking about them differently. So we talked about what makes a good password. Let's talk about a bad password. Default passwords, dictionary and common words, predictable patterns, that is up and down one side of the keyboard. Passwords from password lists. You can go out and download millions and millions and millions of passwords that have been dumped from sites like LinkedIn. And it's actually pretty interesting to see the statistics on them. People use horrible, horrible passwords. And try not to use things from obvious personal details. If I can look at your Facebook profile and figure out your password from that, it probably is not the best password. So, Michael's question, should you change your password every so many months, 3, 6? At my job, we have to change it every 3 months, and really it feels like we have to change it every 3 days. It just drives me crazy. So the common wisdom is, yes, you should change your passwords every however many months. But it's funny, the first few times I did this presentation, I said, yes, you should change your passwords. And then I started reading, thinking, watching more presentations, and really, I don't know. If you want to, if you can keep up with it and still remember your passwords, yes, change them. But if you think about it, let's say someone gets your bank account password. You're going to know it because your money's gone. Then you're going to have to change your password. If it's something that you're worried about someone just sitting and watching, or just they can use it and you don't know it, then it's not a bad idea to change it every so often. But really, even if it is, chances are pretty good that if they got it, they got in, they got what they wanted, they set up another account for themselves, or they set up a forward or something, and they don't need your password anymore. So my advice is, if you want to, if you can keep up with it, if you still use good passwords and still manage all of them in a way that keeps them safe, then go ahead and change them, but it probably isn't all that important. Do you want to yell at me, Michael, or is that okay?
No, I'm with you.
Say it again.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you.
Okay. All right. So as far as systems administrators, if you're someone who takes care of the library website or the OPAC or something, as far as passwords go, don't let people brute force. That is, don't let people just guess and guess and guess and guess, lock them out after so long. Make sure they're encrypted and salted. That is, sort of a bit of randomness is added to each encryption. It makes it much, much harder to guess. Allow people to use large passwords with any characters that they want, especially spaces. Just remember, nobody is immune from getting hacked. So maybe Google, maybe Amazon, but if it was 2 days ago, I might have said maybe LinkedIn, but I think that if we learned anything, pretty much anywhere can get hacked and your information can get out there. There's a great website if you're ever curious if your username or password is out there. It's called Pwned List. That's owned with a P, PWNEDLAST.com. Someone collects all the data dumps, like from LinkedIn. I assume will be there soon if it's not already. And then you can go there and see if it's out there. And if it is, then, well, you know you should be changing things more often. So that's PWNEDLAST. So that's it for passwords. If you have any questions on passwords, let me know. I'm going to go and start on just sort of general staying safe online tips. We could probably spend a good long time debating the secureness of the big three operating systems, Windows, the Macintosh, and Linux. I will just say that if you're using Macintosh or Linux, you're safer than if you're using Windows, just because they are not, in the past, they've not been gone after as much as Windows, and they're certainly not as widely used. So if you're a bad guy and you're spending your time writing all this malicious code trying to break into sites, you're going to focus on the one that's out there the most, and you're going to focus on Windows. That being said, there was a pretty decent sized botnet that sprung up this spring only on the Mac OS, and at the peak, I think it was over 600,000 different Macs were infected by this botnet. So now that the Apple Macintosh operating system is used far more widely than it has been in the past, it's definitely becoming a target more often. So people ask me, how do I know if I'm infected? How do I know if something's on my computer? So I started putting together this list, and I got about halfway through it, and I thought, man, this is just my computer at work. It's always like this. And then I started thinking, well, if I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to infect somebody's computer, I don't want them to know I'm there. So you really don't know if you're infected. If you're a full-time bad guy and you spend 6 months writing this awesome piece of code that's going to steal passwords and turn on somebody's webcam and take screenshots and turn on their microphone, you don't want them to know they're there, that you're there. So you're going to spend your time, as much of your time as you can, hiding it and keeping it quiet. Your antivirus software is a seatbelt. It's not a force field. And it's really important to remember that you can't just say, well, my antivirus is running on there, I should be safe. And they do a pretty good job. Most studies say that they take, or they catch maybe 70 or 80, maybe even 90% of all the malware out there, but that's not everything. So you can still get infected, and it can still be hidden. It'll still find a way to hide itself from your antivirus. On your desktops and laptops, in general, keep everything patched and updated all the time. That is the #1 recommendation from everyone. That is, if you're all patched and everything is running the latest, greatest version, you're closing a lot of doors. Don't trust, in general, don't trust anything like a link that someone sent you on Twitter or Facebook, or a download, something attached to an email. And then, of course, keep all your stuff backed up. So if something, not even just security, if your hard drive fails or your computer gets stolen, you want to have extra copies of your stuff around. Microsoft, so there's something called 0 days, a 0-day attack. That is, a bad guy found a brand new security flaw in something, and they're using it to break into computers before anybody else knew about it. And that seems to be the thing that people worry about the most, but it's such a tiny little percentage. Microsoft says it's about 1% of all attacks happen that way. So this is why keeping everything patched to the latest, greatest version is the best way to go. Bad guys aren't, there's very few bad guys out there searching for new vulnerabilities. Most of them are pretty lazy, and they'll use the same old thing. They know that people don't keep things patched, and they know that there's plenty of machines out there that will use a 6-month-old vulnerability. So on your laptops or your iPads or any of your things that you carry around with you, if you think about it, if I took your laptop or iPad right now, what would I have access to? And I thought I had my laptop stolen last summer, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I'm signed into everything. My email, all my passwords are kept in my browsers, my Dropbox is on there, everything. If somebody had really taken it, I would have been in big, big trouble. So on your laptops, if you can run something like Prey or LoJack that could help you recover it, they're little programs that run in the background and they can phone home if you tell them to, and they can do things like take screenshots and record IP addresses and that kind of thing. As far as passwords go, make sure that when you flip open your notebook that there is a password on it, so that if you do lose it or if it's stolen, at least they'll be locked out and they'll have to spend some time guessing your password. And on your web browsers and everything else, sign out and don't save their passwords and usernames there. That was my biggest worry. In short, just carry a safe, not a suitcase. Keep everything locked up as much as you can on these things because you never know when you're going to lose them or have them stolen. For email, in general, don't trust anything. It's so easy to forge an email. It's absolutely trivial. Don't leave yourself logged into your email account if you're just surfing the web and not doing anything in your email. If you can use a second factor of authentication, Google offers this, well, Facebook offers it as well. They will send a text message to your phone, and you won't be able to get in your email without your phone. And, of course, we all know now to use good passwords. All of these were things that I found in my spam folder on my Gmail account recently, and they're all also happen to be the most common spam waves that are happening out there. If you look in your spam folder, you'll probably see many of the same things. And they are all things that we probably get in our email that we want as well. You know, if you're flying next week, you're going to get an itinerary from US Air. If you're, you ordered something from Intuit or Amazon, I got an email, a real email from FedEx today about something that I ordered that's being shipped today. And people will either put a link to a malicious website in these fake emails, or they will attach a PDF or a spreadsheet or something, and as soon as you open that, then your computer's been infected. As far as web browsers go, we probably use one of three, that is Firefox, Internet Explorer, or Chrome. And this makes the bad guy's job a little bit harder, because if you're a bad guy and you're writing something to exploit a web browser, back 5 or 10 years ago, it was easier because everybody used Internet Explorer. And then everybody started using Firefox, and now it's sort of evenly split between Firefox and Chrome and Internet Explorer. There's a very low percentage of people who use anything else, but they're out there. So if you're a bad guy, to make your life easier, what you're going to do is focus on all the things that we all have in common. That is Adobe, we all have Flash, we all have Acrobat Reader, and Java. We all have Java on our computers, and these are the big three things that most exploits are written against now, especially Java, especially Flash, and the PDFs. They've been notoriously easy to find exploits for it in the past, and they continue to be attacked regularly because they are pretty much ubiquitous and everywhere out there. So if you can, have 2 web browsers on your computer. Have one that's locked down as much as possible, and then another one that's open and sort of doesn't get in the way. And of course, keep everything updated, the browser, and especially all the plugins, especially anything from Adobe and from Java, or Sun, that is Java. So make sure you know the settings behind your web browser. Make sure that phishing and malware detection is turned on, and make sure that auto update thing is turned on as well. Firefox and Chrome both do that now. And I just noticed yesterday that Adobe gave me the option to have Flash update itself, or maybe it was Reader. Adobe is now started doing that as well. They will just update it automatically. If you can, there are great plugins. There's something called ScriptNo or NoScript that will turn off JavaScript. It won't, right now you just surf around and JavaScript's running, and that's really where most problems start, is malicious JavaScript. If you have a plugin that turns that off and lets you turn it back on, you'll go a long, long way to making your browser safe. If you can, there's another browser or a plugin that'll force you to use HTTPS That is the secure version of HTTP, and that'll also help keep your network traffic encrypted. And I feel kind of guilty recommending this, but something to block ads, not because ads are necessarily annoying, which they are, but they're also very, the bad guys are going after ad networks as much as they can. Last year, Google said that they had to disable over 100 million accounts of people trying to get malware spread through the Google ad network. So it's definitely an easy way for a bad guy to spread things, and that's why I recommend that here. There's a great plugin for Firefox and Chrome called Collusion if you like to see where all those cookies, all those tracking cookies are coming from. They build these neat little trees based on where, as you're surfing around, you pick up a cookie here and there and everywhere. And they can go back and look at your history as this neat little tree and see where all the cookies are coming from. Just another, doesn't really keep you safer, but at least you can see pretty pictures and hopefully work to keep yourself a little more private. As far as Wi-Fi goes at home, make sure everything's passworded and encrypted. If you can, limit by MAC address and turn off the DHCP function, and make sure you keep it updated. And if you're not using it, you can just turn it off. And in general, I'll say don't trust public Wi-Fi. I won't say don't use public Wi-Fi, but just be careful. It's very, very easy to cause trouble at Starbucks or Panera Bread or wherever you use Wi-Fi in general. So just, I wouldn't log into my bank if I was out on a public Wi-Fi network, or you know, I try not to even log into my email if I don't have to. But in general, just sort of, you know, keep it in mind. So for social media, make sure you understand and adjust your privacy settings. Facebook, I think we were all familiar with Facebook's never-ending changes on their privacy policy and settings. Use HTTPS. Most of the big ones now will force it. Twitter, Facebook will just automatically default to HTTPS, which is good. And a good rule of thumb is just be skeptical of everything. That is, if you got a direct message on Twitter and it says someone is spreading lies about you, or someone posted a naked picture of you on the internet. I see these regularly at my LAS News Twitter account because it's followed by several thousand people. And these are just worms that are spreading their way. You know, someone downloads it, it then sends that to all of their Twitter contacts, and then someone else downloads it and they tell two friends and they tell two friends and so on. The popular one on Facebook is someone will get a Facebook login and send messages to all their friends saying that they're in England and they've been mugged and they don't have any money and they need you to wire them money. So just sort of be skeptical of everything you see out on your social media areas. The most common threats we see now is something like, you have to see this, a free iPhone 5, someone is lying about you. Anytime somebody dies or something horrible happens, there's a wave of malicious stuff sent through those headings. And everything that gets sent through Twitter gets hidden behind those URL shorteners, and there are ways to see where that URL goes first, and that's never a bad idea, especially if you're not quite sure what it is. Facebook says that less than 4% of all posts were spam. Twitter says that, you know, less than 2%. Facebook, this is from last fall, says that, well, really 0.5% of Facebook users are subjected to any sort of malicious stuff spreading about, which is a great percentage, but if you think about that, that's 4 million people. The number of people using Facebook is so huge that even a tiny percentage of bad stuff being spread around there affects a lot of people. They say that 600,000 times a day someone tries to log into a stolen account. So that's just, they catch 600,000 people a day trying to log into a stolen account, which is just staggering. So onto our cell phones. If you have a cell phone, you probably use Android or the iOS. I can't say I've actually seen anybody who's using a Windows phone, although at Computers and Libraries in March, there was one person in the audience who used it. So as you can imagine, if you're a bad guy, you're going to target the most widely used one, and the easiest one to target is right now is Android. There are Trojans and viruses and malware out there for cell phones, although they are almost exclusively, if not exclusively right now, written for the Android platform because it's much, much easier to do. But even if you have an iPhone, you still have to worry about it getting lost or stolen. And on the iPhones especially, you don't know what the apps have access to. Path was caught maybe 6 months ago downloading everyone's full contact list to their servers unencrypted. For no reason, they didn't tell anybody they did it, and nobody knows what they're doing with it or if it's safe on their servers. And there's a lot of apps like that that you just don't know what they have access to. And then, of course, if you're using open Wi-Fi networks or public hotspots, you have that same thing to worry about. So the same thing goes for your cell phone that went for your laptop. Carry a safe, not a suitcase. You know, password everything, have everything locked down as much as you can. So let's move on to library-specific things. When I did this last fall in, I can't remember where I was now, in downstate New York, someone raised their hand and said, well, we're just a library. Why would anybody come after us? And that's really a good question. I mean, we are just a library, or, you know, you are just one person at home. And I didn't know what to say to him exactly. I started by saying, well, you should worry. I mean, we really are all targets. We talked about it when I first started here, that there are just a very large number of people out there, and they just make very, very easy to use tools that make it very easy to just go after anybody. And it's probably not, your library is probably not a target in that it's just a library, but it's plugged into the internet, and therefore it is a target. It's not that there's a posse of bad guys attacking just libraries that I've seen, but they're attacking everyone, and because you're plugged in, you're a target. Verizon does a very widely read investigations report, I think twice a year now, and from the one in the fall, they said 83% of victims were targets of opportunity. That is, they weren't targeted. 83% of them, probably 100% of them, said, well, we're just a whatever. We're just a gas station, or we're just a little store, or we're just something. We're just a library. They found that 92% of the attacks that were used to get in were just easy. Someone didn't patch something. Someone used a bad password. All these things that we talked about that makes it harder. And 85% of those hacks were found by someone else. So these are pretty convincing numbers here that, you know, most things that gets hacked were not really targeted. Most of those hacks were easy, and most of those hacks were really hard to find. It actually happened to me. One of my servers got hacked and someone else had to tell me. This is from a different survey. This is from TrustWave. Only 16% of the companies that they worked with managed to detect the breach on their own, and the bad guys had an average of 173 days within the victim's environment before detection occurred. That's how hard it is to catch these people. It's easy being bad now. There are so many easy to use things. You know, there are people dedicated to this. This is their job. Security, on the other hand, is hard. It's hard for us to defend because we have, you know, think about everything in a library that we're going to talk about in a little while. You have to make sure that every single thing is completely covered. And the bad guys just have to sit there and find the one thing that you missed. They only need to succeed once. And really, another question I got from someone at CIL last year was, well, you know, we have a firewall. I think that makes us safe, doesn't it? And probably every place that got hacked, I bet LinkedIn has some of the best firewalls that they can buy. You know, firewalls, just like they're your antivirus software, they're a seatbelt. They help. They make it harder. But if somebody's really, really trying, they'll find a way to get around your firewall. So let's talk about the things that we're missing in our library. You know, just ignoring it and thinking you're safe is probably the biggest mistake that we're making. Not preparing and not training are the other two things. So we know now that we really can't ignore it and think we're safe, because most of the time, most security things happen not because we're targeted, but just because they were easy to do, because these automated scanners are out there looking for old holes and easy ways in. So we have to do something. And you think about all the things in your library that you need to protect. Maybe the most important one is the OPAC or the ILS. And if you don't have it hosted in your library, if it's at, I don't know, the state level, or maybe it's hosted by your OPAC vendor, hopefully someone else is keeping their eye on that. But you have the staff computers, anything plugged into the network. You have printers and copiers. You have your website maybe hosted locally or somewhere else. Any number of servers, laptops. You have backups stored somewhere. You have to keep your eye on those. If you have a host or a site hosted or anything hosted at DreamHost, you know that recently one of their backup servers got compromised, and the backup server had all the users' login information on it. So cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, hardwired routers, iPads. And then what about all your employees' home phones, their homes computers and phones and all that other stuff? Maybe more important than the OPAC and ILS, or maybe just as important, all those public access computers that people come in to use now. Not only are they plugged into the web, they are also anyone's allowed to use them, and who knows what they are doing. There was an incident last summer, I believe, where a library actually found a hardware, a keylogger plugged into the back. It was a little USB. It looked like just a thumb drive plugged into the back of two of their computers at the library, two of the public access computers, and everything everyone typed was being recorded by this little USB thing. So I don't know. I would love to put this sticker on every public access computer, but it's probably taking a little too far. There should be something there to sort of remind people the best ways to stay safe on public access computers. Make sure you log out, don't access sensitive sites, beware of that Remember Me option, and hopefully you have all these things turned off by default anyway. Don't send personal or financial information by email. Don't send anything to an unsecured websites. There's probably a list of 100 things you could very easily list on all these computers that no one will ever read and completely ignore. Something else that people will say to me, they'll say, well, we use deep freeze, or we use any of those other things out there that when someone logs out, everything gets reset, or when someone logs out, it restarts itself and resets everything. And if you use deep freeze or whatever else on your computers, go ahead and search Google for deep freeze cracks or hacks or whatever it is, and you'll probably find a long list of ways to get around it. So like your antivirus and like your firewall, just think of it as a seatbelt, not a force field. It's not going to protect the computer from really dedicated people. So what are some practical things you can do?
Blake,
make sure
before you go on.
Yes?
Hello, hello.
Sure.
I know I have a little delay here. We do have a comment from a librarian here in Nebraska, and I think I get their point. He said, not realistic, and he's going back to, I believe, your slide about telling people don't do financial information across the public computers at the library and whatnot. But he says that's not realistic. We have patrons that we are the only way they can access their online accounts. So what are we as libraries supposed to do about those people that the library is their only access to the internet? They don't have it at home. They can't afford it at home. It's the only place they can go to for this.
Yeah, when I used to, at the beginning where Fry was screaming his head off, the second slide there, I used to say that I'm sort of, a lot of what I say today is going to be sort of unrealistic, consultant talk about things that you should be doing that you probably can't. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely one of them. I know I don't know what to recommend. I mean, you have to, some people have to do it. That's the only way that they can possibly do it, and I know that. And, all you can do is make sure you're keeping the computers as safe as you can for them.
I think
And
if they follow all of your previous information and recommendations about how just to keep yourself secure, no matter where you are, whether you're at your home where you've got security and firewall and things, or out public, that can be helpful. Like following all those
right, yeah,
rules about your passwords and what you do and paying attention and be skeptical of all the, things you might receive.
right, absolutely. If you can do your best to educate them and do your best to keep your computers as safe as possible, then you're doing everything you can. If the only way that they can access anything is through your computers, then that's how it is.
Mm-hmm. Cool, great, thank you.
Okay. So keep everything patched and updated, like we've talked about for your home computers, same kind of thing. If you can, have regular automated checks of the public PCs and your network to see what's going on. Have somebody check the internet for usernames and passwords if you can. Just, search your library's name. There's a website called pastebin.com that's a favorite of hackers where they'll just dump, usernames, passwords, whatever they find. And if you can regularly, set up a Google alert for some unique username or password or something, and if you ever get a hit on it, then you've been cracked. If I'm being unreasonable again, I'd say that somebody needs to be dedicated. You should have a dedicated staff member to security. And I know that's really pushing things way too far, but some small part of someone's job should be staying current in the field of security, keeping their eye on the network or the PCs, or split this up amongst a bunch of people at your library. There should be someone who thinks about this kind of stuff on a regular basis. Lost USB drives. I asked if anybody's a member of the LSW group on FriendFeed, I asked what the policy was on lost USB drives, and surprisingly, everybody said, yeah, we just plug them in and try to figure out who they own to, who the owners are, and we try to get them back to them. And USB drives are frequently infected with something, not intentionally infected, although they could be, but I mean, you plug in your USB drive to an infected computer, and frequently it gets infected, and then somebody leaves it behind in the library, and then you plug it into your staff PC, your staff PC is something infected. So maybe I'm being unreasonable on this one, but I would say if you find a lost USB drive, don't plug it into a computer. Just let it sit, or have a computer that's 100 years old that it's not used for anything else, that's not plugged into the network for it.
Blake?
Yes.
I'll second that. I just the moment you said people said we just plugged it in, I kind of did a little freak out here in Krista's office. The Stuxnet thing with the Iranians and getting the virus onto their computers. That, from what I've been reading, that virus got onto their computers that were not connected to the internet. Those were standalone, dedicated computers that basically how it got on there was they gave somebody a flash drive and they plugged the darn thing in.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So, don't plug in strange flash drives. That's so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was surprised that every person that answered my question said they plug them in. And I don't know, maybe it's unreasonable to, I mean, I find one I want to plug in, I want to see what's on it, but it's definitely best practices to just throw it in a box and let it sit.
Mm-hmm.
And then something I see all the time at LIS Host is don't let your domain name expire. All of a sudden, your domain name expires and some bad guys are redirecting all your traffic to some horrible server that's downloading malware or whatever. But it's also just annoying. I mean, at least once or twice a year, someone forgets to renew their domain name and they're on my server and they lost their domain name. It's very infrequent for that to be a library, but just in general, keep that in mind. So some practical resources. SANS is a great organization. They have a ton of good information on there. Their 20 critical security controls are a fantastic starting point. But if security is exciting for you, you could sit there all day and read all their white papers and everything else. And then there's also a book, Securing Library Technology, a How-to-Do-It Manual by Erpin Wright. And it's just a few years old now, but it's great I think every library should have one. There's a lot of checklists and really practical hands-on things to do, great advice. Because it's a few years old, there's a few things that are a little bit dated, but it's absolutely worth buying. So the other thing that we're not doing is we're not training. It's fairly important that people try to think more securely and also at the same time think like the bad guys. I've said this a few times. You know, if you showed me this picture 8 years ago before I had my first kid, I would have said, oh, that's nice. There's a wall. What color is that? Is that elk's tongue? That's a nice color. I want to get that. Now I see that picture, and this is what I see. You know, I have a 3-year-old who will actually stick a knife in a light socket. I caught him trying to do it. And that's, you know, when you have a kid, you start thinking differently. You start thinking like a parent, and everything all of a sudden looks evil when you have a little kid. And when it comes to security, it's the same kind of thing. You know, I look at this and I see, I don't know, just some master lock. If you're somebody who's into lock picking, you look at this and you say, oh, I could figure out the combination on that in 5 minutes easy. So to digress a little bit, I was looking for pictures while working on this in the spring for internet or for computers and libraries, and I typed in, there was another slide that I took out here, I typed in baseball bat into Google image search and saw a good baseball bat, clicked it on it, went through to the site, and bam, just like that, my computer was infected. I picked up some kind of drive-by thing just because I was looking for a baseball bat on, and it was actually a just a sort of a small retailing site, and I got infected. And luckily it was fairly easy to remove, and it wasn't anything too nasty. But it was I actually got to laugh at myself because I got infected while working on this presentation, and it's easy to do. So here's an email. I'm giving these examples as ways that we should be thinking about things, ways to maybe think different.
Blake?
Yes?
It's good to know that even the experts can have this happen to them, that us ignorant peons, it's not just us. We don't have to feel like, you know, stupid because we got it.
Yeah, I know I don't claim to be perfect. My LinkedIn password is one that I use for other stupid sites like LinkedIn, so I ran around and changed a bunch of other passwords today. I definitely make mistakes too. So one more example, I joined a unnamed professional organization about a year ago, and I got their welcome email, and it said, "Dear Blake, we're welcome to we're excited to have you, blah blah blah. Here's your membership and web access information below." And so I saw, okay, my name, great, member ID, great, online user ID, great, online password, Carver, great, termination date, which sounded forbidding. And then I thought, wait a minute, did they set my password to my last name lowercase? And I thought, did they do that for everybody? And so I logged into the website. I found the membership database. I found the person who was member number 00123457. Then I went to 58. Then I wrote down their last names, and I thought, I bet out of these 5, I could log in as at least 3 of them. And sure enough, I was wrong. I logged in as all 5 of them. So and I went along and found my friends who are members of this organization, and I was able to log in as most of them as well. So this is the kind of thing that probably, I don't know, thousands of people got this email and none of them thought about it. So it's just important. And really, I don't know, what could you possibly do in here? Maybe change your friends' passwords or change their name to, something obscene that I won't repeat. But in general, you need to just think about these kind of things and be aware that they're out there. So when you're training your library staff, you want to talk about things like phishing and privacy, passwords, email attachments, virus alerts, safe social networking, keeping things updated, all the things that we've gone over today. I've actually done this whole thing as a 4-hour workshop, and it was hard for me to fit everything in. I'm already going on an hour here, and I'm having problems fitting everything here as well. There's so much to talk about. So what about training your patrons? Well, I think just saying the word training your patrons is enough to make us roll our eyes for the most part. You know, they don't really care about it, and they probably have really horrible browsing habits, or worse yet, they're actually trying to actively break into your computers. You have to, these things need to be, they need to be given, I mean, this, it sounded like I just called patrons things. Your computers that the patrons use need to be locked down as much as possible. They need to have that principle of least privilege. So, you know, you might also want to have security training for your patrons, but probably the people who need it the most aren't going to show up. You know, maybe work on some kind of library security mantra. This is based on a really old presentation. Security, privacy, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and access. These are nice things that pretty much everything you can do as far as security goes will fall under one of these. So really quickly, I want to talk about some server-side security things. Not really technical or just for sysadmins, but just sort of general things that are kind of interesting. You know, keeping a server secure is very similar to keeping a PC secure. You want to keep things updated. You want to use good passwords. You don't want anybody to be able to log in. You want to keep good logs. You want to watch for file changes, something called an intrusion detection system. You want to use a firewall, obviously, and don't run programs that you don't need to. Another very important thing to keep in mind is any good website can go bad at any time. It's really easy, just like it's really easy to exploit your home computer with all these automated things. There's automated things written to exploit websites, and there's probably more of those than that are targeted for home computers. I found that when I was just searching for a baseball bat, and I went to some, you know, innocent-looking small retailer site and got infected there. So many sites now run on WordPress or Drupal or PHPBB, Joomla, OS Commerce, and so on. These are, you know, we probably all, if we don't use WordPress, we probably all know somebody who does. One of our favorite websites runs on it. And these are all very easy to exploit if they haven't been updated. So if you run WordPress, especially WordPress, you need to keep it updated all the time. And once again, that question comes up, why? Why would, you know, I just have a tiny little blog that has like 6 readers. Why would they come after me? Well, it's easy. They're not targeting you. They just plugged into some specific search string into Google, and out came your website. There's a significant percentage of traffic to websites are really evildoers. This is from Encapsula.com. They did a neat study on I forget how many millions of sites. And when I saw this, I thought that can't be right. They're saying half of all traffic is non-human. They're saying 20% of that half is search engines, and then you know, my slide's covered up here. I can't add. You know, another 20% of that are evildoers. And so I looked at, you know, I said, well, I have web servers. I'll look at my logs. And sure enough, it's pretty close on my web servers as well. There's a lot of really bad stuff out there, and you know, all of my websites, all 300 or 400 on my servers are under attack constantly. So how good sites go bad? If we had more time, I could tell you all about remote file inclusion, SQL injection, and remote file inclusion, or local, and cross-site scripting and directory traversal. But these are, you know, these are the same old thing. This is how bad guys infect websites, and this is how they've always infected them. They're really easy to exploit and really hard to defend against, and really hard to program. If you're a programmer, these are things that are really easy to miss. So another personal story. This is a screenshot from the LSW room where last fall, Kristen asked, out of curiosity, how often do staff PCs at your library get infected with viruses? What does your IT department do about it when they do? So she says some interesting blah, blah. I comment, or Iris comments, somebody called Iris comments, and then I comment here. And luckily I chose my words really, really carefully here. The first sentence I wrote was, it's really hard to get this right. And I'm glad I did that, because the next day I get a message from her and says, to Iris and Blake, and then just a full disclosure, basically she's saying, Iris, it's your website, Blake, it's on your web server. And I saw that and I thought, uh-oh. So sure enough, I go look at the website, and the computer I'm on gets a Malwarebytes anti-malware thing popped up, and sure enough, it had been infected. And I see this all the time. I host 200, maybe 300 WordPress sites, and if they are not updated, they will get hacked. If I find an outdated WordPress install and it's not hacked, I'm actually surprised now. There's so many bots out there trying to infect WordPress. On the server side of things, I do run something called Mod Security, which is a firewall that does a great job defending against those 5 common threats. And it ties into Apache, which is the web server program. And basically, there's just these dumb keyword rules that looks for things like, if you see below that graphic there, there's mortgage, auto loan, pre-qualify. Basically, that's just saying if you see mortgage, auto loan, pre-qualify, refinance, tram, adult, or Altram, just block it. That's a spammer. And it does the same thing for different code injection things. It does a pretty decent job most of the time. And I tie that into something called the config server security and firewall, and that watches all sorts of different logs, email, login failures, the mod security thing, and ties into my firewall. And if it spots anybody doing something wrong for 5 or 6 times, they just get firewalled and they can't get to that server anymore. This is another report from TrustWave. They used to do monthly, but they seem to have given up on. But the top, I don't know how well you can see it, but the big significant percentage of scans of attacks that they found, that's sort of light blue there, that's against a single vulnerability in a single WordPress plugin. And I see the same kind of thing. The number of people looking for this vulnerability that's about a year old now is just unbelievable. There are scans that are just thousands and thousands of hits a day looking for this. And so this is just to show that, you know, keeping things updated to the latest version is really important, especially for WordPress, but on any website, there's people out there just scanning for it. So I'm just about done here, and it's been just about an hour, so that worked out pretty well. If you want to stay current, up on my website there's a link to down here, I have a OPML file for a feed reader that has about 450, I think, security sites in it. You have to be pretty dedicated to want to keep up with that, but I'll recommend just these few sites. Bruce Schneier, and Naked Security from Sophos. They're a vendor, and it's not about nudity naked. It's about just talking about security without worrying about if you're naked or not. Security FAQs does a great job on the really basic stuff. The SANS Reading Room, which I mentioned before, lots of good white papers there. And then if you like podcasts, the Security Now podcast is one of the best out there. It's part of Leo Laporte's network of video and podcasts that he does. So the 3 most important things we covered, hopefully that sunk in. Make sure you're using good passwords, that is unique, long, and not used across different websites. I'll go ahead and say I'll say be paranoid. That is, don't trust things, don't just click on links, don't just download attachments, even if they come from people you know. And make sure everything is updated all the time. If you do these 3 things, you'll greatly reduce your chances of being hacked, because these are the things that almost all hackers are going after, and so many people don't do these things that if you do them, then you're going to really close a lot of doors and they'll probably just leave you alone. So I'm going to send Krista this slide deck. I forgot to do it this morning, but there's a very similar version at lisnews.org/security, along with a whole bunch of blog posts and the OPML file and all sorts of other stuff. And there is an ITsec for Lib email group. It's on the same server as Web for Live at Notre Dame. I can't think of, if you go to IT Security for Libraries, .org, you'll find it there. So it's a very, very new, very low volume listserv where we talk about security stuff. And that's about it. If you have any other questions, you can drop me an email or drop them in the little box there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Blake. We do have a couple of comments and question. One comment, one of our librarians here in Nebraska had a good analogy when you're talking about why do I care, who's going to come after my library kind of thing. Said it's like a shark attack. The shark doesn't care who you are, it's just looking for a meal.
Oh, that's great. Can I reuse that?
Yeah.
I'm doing this 3 more times this year. I'm going to use that and credit it to somebody in Nebraska.
Yes, I will tell you, I'll give you the info, no problem.
Okay, thanks.
And that same person, this is one of our IT type people here in the state, about having the security on the computers, and you give those examples of Iris's website, who's a great website, but she just wasn't up to date. He gets complaints about having security features enabled on their public computers. One patron kept going to a hijack site and complaining about all the pop-up warnings she kept getting. Like, well, it's not our fault, it's the site. You've gone to a bad site. We do have a thank you. Thank you for the
not
scary...
a day goes by that...
Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you. Thank you for the scary information. Need to do a much better job on security. Yes.
No problem.
And we do have one question. One of our staff here at the commission actually wants to know, what about not running as admin in Windows? How does that help?
Yeah, that's one of the things that there's a whole bunch of stuff in the 4-hour version of this that I can't really squeeze into the 1-hour version, but yeah, in general, especially Windows, but if you happen to use Linux on the desktop, you don't want to run as admin or root. That closes doors because that makes it harder for people to do things wrong. At my work, most people are not given admin rights because they would screw everything up. But it also makes it more secure and harder to install programs for both them and just random bad guys out there.
Yeah, we don't have admin access here either, so.
Yeah, it's part of that principle of least privilege thing where you lock the computer down as much as possible and still make it usable.
Although I'll admit, I run as admin natively at home, so I get it.
Yeah, it's one of those things we all do. It's I know I shouldn't be doing it, but here I am doing it.
It's so much easier.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll add, there is such a thing as a secure computer. It's unplugged, disconnected from the network, and locked in a closet.
Right.
It's just not very usable.
Okay, that was all the ones that we had. Except for one last thing. Anybody have any other questions, comments, suggestions? You can type them in here. Someone did ask about the book that you had mentioned. As I said at the beginning, all of the links that Blake mentioned today will be, if they haven't already, added to the Commission's Delicious account, and I will also have a link to that book there as well, so you'll be able to get everything that he mentioned here off of that when we put up the recording of the session. We'll have that. Yeah, it's back there somewhere.
He's trying to find it. Yeah.
There's the title, but we'll have a link to it as well when we put up the recording too, so that you'll be able to.
Securing Library Technology, How to Do It manual. Yerp and Wright. I don't know how to pronounce that first name.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, it doesn't look like any final questions or desperate information has come in. Thank you very much, Blake. That was very good. I'm impressed that you do a 15-minute version of this.
It's a little more challenging.
It's 3 slides.
Yeah. And it's just all the scary ones. Okay, and so thank you very much, Blake.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. As I said, a session has been recorded and will be posted up later today. More links I do need to add to our Delicious account, and the PowerPoint slides, as Blake said, he will send to me, and I will be able to load those up as well. Getting stuff out of the way here. So thank you everyone for attending today's session, and I hope you'll join us next week when Well, our topic will be doing training for your trustees or your board members. Librarian here in Nebraska, Library Director Steve Fosselman in Grand Island has set up a model for training his trustees that he wants to share with everyone. So if you're interested in getting your trustees on board with certain things and how to get them better involved in the library, I'm not sure. I'm going to learn about it too next week. Sign up and join us next week for that. Other than that, we are wrapped up for today. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.